This is Maritess.
Neil.
And this is Laura. Welcome to MedSurg Moments, the AMSN podcast.
This podcast is an engaging look at the lives of and surrounding medical surgical nurses.
We're proud med-surg nurses, just like you, sharing our stories, insights, and experiences to support you in your nursing journey.
Our topic today is floating to other units. But before we get started, let's see what's new with everyone. Sam, we're pleased to have you back with us as a guest co-host. Why don't you start?
It's great to be back. Thanks for having me. Not a lot going on, but we just have a really successful D&V survey. So that was really exciting for us. If you don't know what D&V is, it's similar to like JCO for our accreditation. So that was really successful. So big celebration there. And then I live in the inland Northwest, so lots of lakes and water and stuff around us. So now that the weather's finally warming up a little bit, trying to get outside a little bit more. But other than that, nothing too exciting. How about you, Neil?
Great to be back for another episode. Somewhat exciting news. I'm the guy that just about answers any email. And my current employer sent out an email kind of asking for stories of new employees. And of course, you guys know by now, I'm always glad to run my mouth about something. And ironically, they picked me to be part of an ad campaign of some sort. So I even had a little photo shoot recently. So I don't know if it's going to be on digital or billboards or the media that's going to be used to present it. But I'm excited to see how they're going to use me in their promotion for recruitment. Because I already recruited one old coworker and one friend that's a nurse to Moses Cone. So I'm a little bit anxious, excited, and nervous about if I'm going to be plastered on a billboard somewhere or just I'm going to be that face on the webpage when you open up their webpage. So that's been very exciting for me, I guess. My little claim to fame besides having a podcast.
That is so exciting, Neil. I need your autograph when we see each other. I don't know when, but we need an autograph. You're a celebrity. It's official. That's
our convention. Convention will meet up one day.
I'll bring my little guest book, like when you go to Disney, you got an autograph book. I'll bring one.
Now I'm going to really think about what my autograph looks like.
I'm going to make those for us.
Oh, there you go. And then I'll put my crochet coasters. We'll do that. But no, seriously, that is exciting. That is very exciting, Neil. Thanks for sharing. And Samantha, I heard DNV twice in this podcast. I think it was Caroline who shared something about DNV. So that's exciting too. I've never heard of DNV before, like how it works. That would be great if you can share that with us next time. With me, I wanted to share, we have decided where we're going for our vacation, and this is very exciting. So we have decided we're going to the Philippines. I haven't gone home for 11 years. So this is going to be really very exciting, and it's just me and my girls. So we'll see where we're going, how it's going to be. I know it's a lot of planning to do. I got approved for a 3-week vacation.
Wow, that's exciting.
I know. I'm really very excited. Very, very excited. Haven't said anything yet to my family members back home. I don't have a lot of them there anymore. Most of them are here. But I'm more excited to just see the places. It's a different culture back home. So I'll keep you all posted.
Now, Maritess, I have to ask, is Jollibee as good in the Philippines as it is in America?
I wouldn't say yes or no, because for me, it's comfort food and I love it regardless. And it's bad advertising. So it's good. Yes and yes. So thank you for asking. Laura, what's new with you?
I have a friend that's getting married in a few months, and I am working on a watercolor for her. So my skills are getting better. I'm not sure if I'm going to end up giving this to her, if I'm going to end up buying a watercolor for her, because she wanted a watercolor for her bathroom and she admired one that I had in my bathroom that I did myself. So I'm playing around with that and we'll see how that goes. I'm my biggest critic. I'm sure everybody can understand that, but we'll see. We'll see. I've got a few months before she gets married, so I'll keep you guys posted on that. So why don't we go ahead and move on to our topic? So today's topic is one that I suggested, which is floating to other units. And I thought I'd start with a little background as to why I chose this topic. So I have worked at two different hospital systems, and I have seen the residency program work in different ways. I have a few residents from my last position that still reach out to me with questions or just to kind of vent from bad days or to celebrate with them when they have exciting things happen to them. And one of them got floated to a unit that she didn't feel comfortable being floated to. She's a med-surg nurse, and she got floated to a mother-baby unit, which on the surface is a little bit scary. They told her they were going to give her easy patients, and when they told her what kind of patients she would be taking care of, she agreed to take the assignment. There's a lot more that goes on into taking care of those patients than she was prepared to handle. She left her shift that day in tears and just wanted to call to talk about it. So that was one of the reasons that I picked this, because I want to discuss that with my colleagues here. Do you guys have any floating standards that you use at your facilities or floating policies?
We definitely do at our organization, but usually the floating clusters are within like the same service line. So if you're a med-surg nurse, you would go to a different med-surg unit. And if you were asked to float to somewhere like maybe mother-baby or pediatrics or something, you would never be asked to take an assignment. And that has been a long-standing policy, at least the 7 years that I've been here.
Yeah, and I think they did work around that. She was working with another nurse. She wasn't responsible for the full care of these patients. There was a nurse there. I think they just gave her a larger patient load. And then she had this floated nurse to help her with some of these things. But she was very uncomfortable with the whole situation. I don't think I had ever seen that happen quite like that before. I know nobody likes floating. I didn't like floating to other facilities, but what you said is absolutely correct. When you float somebody to another unit, you only want to give them skills that are within their scope of practice for their license.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine how uncomfortable she felt. It's got to be such a scary feeling. And again, always putting their patients at the center of what we're doing. And if you are taking care of patients and you really don't know the basics of that unit, where anything is, what you should be looking out for, who the providers are, that's tough.
It's a very scary situation. So, Laura, you asked about the policy or a standard protocol for floating staff members. I do know that in the units that I've worked with, what they do is they do have a checklist for each of the staff members who will be floating. I love to float. I love to meet new people. I love the small talks. I do like to talk to other people. And so one of the things that I developed when I became an educator was to have that staffing protocols. And it was developed also together with the directors, because it really gives the idea of what are the things that you can and cannot do. To Samantha's point, what are the core skills that the med-surg can do? What are the things that an L&D nurse can do? If the L&D nurse will be floated to the med-surg, what are the skills that can overlap? And so I'm very much open to the idea of getting patients that I have never had before. But one of the things that I share with the charge nurse is, this is my core competency. These are the things that I can do. If there are things, who can I reach out to? Who is my resource person? And maybe that's
a great point.
Yeah, that's the reason also why I enjoy it, because I get to work with others, and there are skills that probably I have not seen. I would call that resource nurse, and we'll work on those together. As a floater too, I think it's so important that the policies and the protocols of that facility. And so that's one of the things that I would look out when they say, oh, you're going to be floated in this unit. So I always ask the charge nurse, where do you put all your policies? Is there a different policy from my unit? This is where I'm from. Is there specific patient care or any doctor that really has a specific pathway that I need to follow? I ask those questions. And at the end of the shift, I think mostly I liked it because of the attitude of being open, I guess, to learn.
Yeah, I'm sure your attitude had a lot to do with it, especially when you like learning new things and meeting new people. But there are people that don't enjoy that. They like their routine. They like their things to be exactly the same way. But I like what you said about a checklist, because I think we used to have that for agency nurses, like something with like where the bathroom is, what's the code to the supply room, all of those kinds of things. So maybe that would be something that we could do, is work on creating a checklist for float nurses.
We even have like a scavenger hunt. What are the codes to, let's say, the supply room, the nourishment room? Who are the people that you need to call for radiology? Who is your tele person? Who is your charge nurse? It's actually like a form that they can fill up with the charge nurse. This would really be your guide if you're going from one unit to another. And then, like I said, from that basic checklist, the director develop their own skills and other things that they need to do in the unit that would really help not just the travel nurses, but also floating nurses and other staff members.
Where I used to work, you wouldn't be floated to mother and baby. You might be floated to like an ortho floor if you were med surg, but you wouldn't be such a fish out of water in that situation. Most recently, at one of the places I float to now, they do have something just like that, Maritess. And I have to admit, even though I've been there for a couple of weeks now, I slide that little pamphlet out of my pocket every once in a while and double check the numbers for a couple of different people I need to call on there. My previous experience at a hospital, they had these great Volt phones that were, it's like an iPhone, and it was a refurbished iPhone. It had a program in it that you could just type the name of the doctor or radiology, and it would bring up all the radiologists in that building. That was a great device to have with floating, but I also do think that safety device is a great idea when places actually implement that, and it's up to date, most importantly.
I also wanted to talk on the flip side of it, because I started thinking back to the float experiences that I had. And people on the unit itself can make all the difference. So if you're floated to a unit and you've got staff members that are supportive of you and are checking on you and making sure that you have a resource, that they're being a friendly face and that you feel like you can ask questions if you needed to, that can make all the difference versus another unit where no one is helping you and you have to beg for help or look for somebody to witness with you or find somebody to ask a question to. So I put that out there to all of our listeners out there, is to be kind to those nurses that are being floated to your department and help them out, check in on them, and help them have a positive experience.
I think that is so great. And I think what's interesting too is sometimes with the amount of travelers that we've had and people from the float pool and just kind of a lot of turnover, they won't even know who's who. They'll be like, maybe they're a traveler. Are they core staff? I have no idea. And so I think if you are that person who floated somewhere else, I think communicating with that, being like, hey, I'm from a different unit. I'm with you guys today. Could somebody give me a quick tour or something like that, just to open up and be like, hey, here I am over here. Help me out. Don't let me drown. We'll be here. We'll be here together.
Welcoming those people on, whether it's floated within the hospital when you're unit to unit, or like I said, the last 2 floor positions I've held now have been professional float pool. And some people kind of give you the up and down because they know you make a little bit more being the flexible float person. But after a while, when you show your value, also, I think they tend to realize, okay, he's really here to help us, or she's really here to help us. But that extra money comes at the price of not being in your comfort zone all the time, that uncomfortable pay, I kind of call it sometimes. But the most important thing is to be the most friendliest of faces, because in the end, your patients and you are going to benefit from it if you're that floor accepting float person. They're there to help you more than anything, not take your job away.
I think you deserve every extra penny that you are getting as a float nurse.
What made a big difference is that I know that I'm floating that shift. That made me very open to float. So we have that policy in our facility that, you're floating on that day. So some people would call out, right? Because they probably would like, I don't want to float, right? I don't want to float. But our director, when I was still on the bedside, she would make it a point that, okay, so you're floating on this day. Which unit do you want to float? Because we have a lot of units, med surg units anyways. And so expectation wise, I know I'm floating. I know where I'm floating. And if that supervisor would say, no, you're floating on different floor, I'm calling my director. Just thinking back of those experiences that I had in the past, what made it different? It was really all about communication. And so when one time the supervisor said, you're floating in the ICU, I said, no, I am not floating in the ICU. Like in my head, I didn't say it out loud. I said, I was told I'm floating in the step-down unit. I'm not floating in the ICU, but I'm floating in a step-down unit. But no, we needed you in the ICU. Please understand, I am not an ICU nurse. And she said, no, you're going there. And so I called my director and I said, they're floating me in the ICU. You know what's going to happen, right? You're going to have codes. And I put humor into it. I always put humor and make it lighter for her. And she was like, no, they're really putting you there. Let me call. So she was really very supportive. And I think it also gives the idea that it's not that you're declining the post, but you're being true to yourself. You don't want to give extra problems to other people. You may say, oh, I can take care of open heart patients, because in our ICU, we have 4 ICUs. We have the open heart, we all have the neuro, and we have the med-surg ICU. I can probably go to the med-surg ICU, but if you're putting me to any ICU, I don't know what to do with all those trips, right?
We should definitely encourage people to speak up, to ask those questions. Okay, you're floating me over here. What kind of patients am I going to have? What are you expecting me to do throughout the shift?
Absolutely. When you were asking the question a while back, it really gives me flashbacks. What did I do to make it easier for me? Is it really a choice that I wanted it to be easier for me? But what made me shift that attitude? Looking back, it's really the support of my director, the support of the team members, the attitude of the team as well. It really helped a lot.
I can remember having an ICU nurse float to a med-surg unit, and that's usually not a good shift for them. They like being in the ICU. They like taking care of the patients they take care of in the ICU, and coming down to a med-surg floor is not usually on the top of their bucket list. So I can remember having people that came and took it in stride, just like you said. They're like, well, I'm here. I may as well do a good job. And they were pleasant to work with. And then you've got some that are rolling their eyes all night and just complaining, or you hear them talking to their friends on the other unit, and that makes it difficult. So we just have to take that in stride. We have to do what we can to make them comfortable, but we're not going to make everybody happy.
I wanted to share this, Laura, because you mentioned something about ICU nurses floating in the med-surg unit. And I do remember there was an ICU nurse who floated in the med-surg, and she got 7 patients. And she was like, no, I don't know how to take care of this. And I said,
she wouldn't know how to see. That to me is unfair.
And she's like, is this how many patients you take care? Yeah, it's a night shift too. You might get 8. And she's like, oh, no, I don't think I can do it. Well, you got to tell the charge nurse. She said, but, and because she's an ICU nurse. And I said, no, it's not about that. It's not your forte. You only take care of 1 patient, 1 to 2 patients, and that's it. How are you going to take care of 7? And she's like, there's so many of these meds that I need to do in 1 hour. And so,
yeah, I don't think that's fair. I wouldn't consider that a fair assignment for someone that's coming from the ICU. I feel like that's putting them at a disadvantage. So there are obviously some staffing challenges across the board right now for everybody, but I hope she spoke up.
She did. She actually did. I had to escort her, and she's a new ICU. That's why.
They're experts in their own field, and coming to a med-surg floor is definitely out of their comfort zone. So what can we do to make them feel better about them having to come to our unit? Because they're going to have more patients. I think we try to cap our ICU nurses at 4 patients, and we try not to give them admissions or discharges. We try to give them established patients. We have to try to be selective about the patients that you give them. It's not out of their scope to take care of these patients, but they don't have the time management skills that a med-surg nurse does. It's a whole different world for them. So let's give them a little bit of grace when they come to the unit. Our patients are awake and alert sometimes. Their patients are not always awake and alert. So they're out of their comfort zone when they come to our unit. So we need to kind of go a little bit above and beyond to make sure that they have what they need and they have support. Because if we make it a pleasant experience, maybe they won't feel as much stress the next time they have to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think welcoming them with open arms and offering yourself up as a resource and somebody they could come to if they have questions. I think finding out too, like, what are you able to do? We're so used to being like, well, I can't do that. But what can you do? What can you help us with today? What are some things that you would feel comfortable doing? How can we contact you? Making sure that they know how to contact everybody else. I think that will definitely give them a better experience than just being kind of thrown in. At my organization, I don't think that ICU nurses would be floated and expected to take a patient assignment, even in a med-surg area. And that would strictly be used kind of more of a episodic or resource nurse type of ways. But I think same things apply, just making sure that they kind of have a trusted person that they can come to during the shift if they have questions, if they're not sure about something, because med-surg is a completely different world than the ICU.
And I think it really goes down to we all need to respect our specialties. If you're med-surg, that's a specialty. If you're ICU, it's a specialty. Go to the ED, OR. We do have different skills. And so we really need to be open and be mindful that there are certain skills for these specialties. Being a resource person for each of the nurses who are working in our unit, that's going to make or break your shift. And so might as well make it a good shift. Be nice to everyone, whoever comes to your unit.
Yeah, that goes a long way. But I also think if you are floated to a unit and you're definitely feeling that discomfort, I like what you said, Maritess, earlier about how you just kind of called your director to say, I just wanted you to be aware that this is what I'm being asked to do. Keep everybody in the loop. I know I have been in that chair, that house supervisor chair, where they're trying to create a staffing plan for shifts that are understaffed and they're getting in contract nurses. I know it's difficult. And sometimes they see RN next to your name and they're like, well, I'm going to put you where I need to put in RN. So they're dealing with a lot of things on their plate too. And some things might not be at the top of their head when they make those staffing plans. So it's important to speak up about your discomfort, whether that's to that house supervisor or to your own leadership team on your own unit. But make sure that people are aware. Just double check. Are you sure this is where I'm supposed to go? I've never done this before. I'm not comfortable. And they're going to do something to either make you feel more comfortable or they're going to come up with another plan, hopefully.
Because at the end of the day, it's about the patient. And so if you are really not comfortable with that specific unit and you don't know any of those skills, might as well find another person who would add value to the unit rather than you who's trying to scramble and figuring out what to do.
Yeah, I think Neil said it best. It's all about the patients. The patients are the ones that are going to be at the root of this.
So there is one time that Maritess, I think you had mentioned, and I had mentioned having that list of providers, and especially on a med-surg floor, you'll get an onslaught of different surgeries and medical providers all like kind of living together on the floor. And the number I had paged was a person's personal pager. It was an old number that got when they redid the whole system for the hospital and they went to that Volt phone. A lot of them went away with the pagers because you could directly text on the Volt phones or have a page sent through there. So I paged somebody's personal pager. And the sad part was they had somebody in their family who was in the hospital. So they got extra worried that there was somebody calling from the hospital. So I definitely had to use some quick people-pleasing skills to kind of let them know, no, I'm so sorry. This is not about that family member. This is something else totally unrelated. Of course, we all know don't use names or anything like that, whether we're sending pages or anything to doctors. So that was kind of embarrassing not to have updated information floating from floor to floor. So it's definitely important to keep that stuff up to date and relevant.
I think also we need to try to avoid floating brand new staff that haven't even acclimated to their own units yet. I know at one point we used to have a 6-month ban on floating somebody. I can't remember if that has changed or not, but it's hard enough getting acclimated to your own unit before having to go learn how another unit operates.
That, and we always had a good list. There was a rotating list, but I like the 6 month. I would even say a year.
Oh.
I think before you decide you don't like any job, career, profession, give it a year. See it through a season, like a relationship. See it through a season. I always think back to my BH days. Winter was rough on BH because you had a bunch of admissions because you had a lot of transient people that didn't want to be out on the street. During the summer was great because everyone wanted to be out. So it was very low acuity, low census. Even with oncology, during the summer, you would get actually a lot more sick people because they would be out doing things as opposed to in the winter where you would have low census because people were staying home more. Even though with the holidays, they were still very cautious with being around family members. So give it a year. So I think actually a year would be a good time to wait to float new staff. Not only, yes, the infamous rotation list and who's actually updating the rotation.
I can remember as a manager trying to update that list. It's not easy to keep up with who floated last and try to be fair about deciding that because the shifts are never what you think they are. You could be fully staffed and end up having call-ins, or you could be very, very short and have a whole lot of people pick up shift. You just never know. So it's really hard to keep up with that list, but that's always a good plan. So kind of a good rule of thumb, when you start a new job, maybe check out that flow policy. Well, believe it or not, guys, we are almost out of time. But just before we go, let's quickly summarize what we've learned. So floating to another area outside of med-surg can create a good deal of anxiety. So ask for policies, staffing protocols, and other guidance regarding the scope of your role in advance. Consider asking for a checklist to be created to help you and other float nurses better understand the role and the requirements of the assignment. Be a friendly floater. If you're floating, be sure to communicate and let the staff know who you are, what you're there for, and ask for help in orienting to the unit. If you're being asked to float to an area for which you are uncomfortable or feel ill-equipped, such as the ICU, speak up, ask questions, and be true to yourself. Be sure to give grace to float nurses who come to your med-surg unit. Welcome them with open arms and help them adjust to the time management requirements of a med-surg nurse. Respect all specialties and the unique skills each of us have. Respect all specialties and the unique skills each of us have as specialty nurses. And remember, ultimately, it is all about what's best for the patient in the end. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. We look forward to connecting with you on the next episode of MedSurg Moments, the AMSN podcast. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. Send us your questions, topic ideas, and feedback via our official MedSurg Moments email address, amsnpod@amsn.org. That's amsnpod@amsn.org.
Please be sure to leave us a review and recommend MedSurg Moments wherever you get your podcasts to help us reach even more listeners.
The content within the MedSurg Moments podcast represents the views, thoughts, and opinions of the co-hosts, may not necessarily reflect the views, thoughts, and opinions of the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses.
Until next time, this is Laura.
Neil.
And this is Maritess. And always remember, MedSurg Moments is a moment in our lives, a moment in our MedSurg careers that makes a huge difference.